Welcome back to Velsheen Rule. Plan for a staycation. That was the message a D.C. court gave the one and only Roger Stone, former advisor to President Trump, during his arraignment today.
Stone was ordered not to leave the D.C. area or South Florida after pleading not guilty to charges brought by special counsel Robert Mueller. Stone has put up a defiant front, claiming he wouldn't testify against the president and that he wouldn't cooperate with the special counsel, while tempering his rhetoric by saying he would tell the truth under oath.
Even though he's charged with
not telling the truth,
also known as lying.
All right, let's take a closer look at Roger Stone, what he's charged with, how he fits into the Russia investigation, and just what the special counsel might want from him. Stone is charged with 5 counts of making a false statement having to do with his testimony before 2 congressional committees, lying under oath. Next, 1 count of witness tampering relating to his efforts to silence a radio host whose testimony contradicted Stone's, but was backed up with text messages and emails, according to the indictment. And finally, 1 count of obstructing an official proceeding by allegedly giving that false testimony. Stone features in the Trump-Russia connection as well. He corresponded with conspiracy blogger Jerome Corsi, who may have a connection to Julian Assange, though Corsi denies this. Stone is also connected to radio host Randy Credico. Credico is the witness Stone allegedly tried to intimidate. The radio host had Assange on his show, and the special counsel's indictment cites messages that Stone sent trying to get in touch with Julian Assange. Assange and his organization WikiLeaks are, of course, connected to the Russian intelligence service and Vladimir Putin after Russian hackers stole Democratic emails and released them through WikiLeaks, which was part of the attempts to influence the U.S. election. Stone is deeply connected to Donald Trump, serving as an advisor for years.
Decades.
But Stone himself may not be the main target here. In the indictment, Stone references WhatsApp, which is an encrypted messaging service. The FBI raid seized several electronic devices. The early morning search may have been meant to prevent Stone from erasing or destroying the data, giving the special counsel a look into communications with other players in the Russian drama and Russian hackers themselves.
Call me naive. At this point, don't you think he would have deleted his device?
I do wonder that. Like, we've been talking about Roger Stone being arrested or indicted for months. Roger Stone's been talking about Roger Stone being indicted. So if that was meant to be the don't delete stuff from your device thing, not sure I believe that. Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.